Thanks so much, Nicoria. Thank you all for joining me and Michael's today. I'm so excited to craft with all of you. We are going to be making your very own little mushroom forest artwork. And you can make as many mushrooms as you want. As you can see, I've got quite a few here in all different shapes and sizes and colors. And so you can get creative with yours and make them with your favorite colors as well. So I'm going to go through all the supplies we're going to be using first, and then we'll get started. So first, we are going to be using a sheet of construction paper. You can use any color that you want. We are going to watercolor the background of it, so a lighter color works best. But if you don't want to watercolor the background, you just want to do a plain sheet of paper, any color is fine. And then we are making all of our mushrooms out of foam sheets. So we've got all sorts of fun colors of Creatology foam sheets. And I used pink and red, yellow, green, white. But again, you can use any colors that you want. So if you want to make yours blue or black or orange, that would all be super cute as well. And then we are going to be painting. So like I said, we are using watercolors to paint the background of our little forest scene, as well as acrylic paint to paint on the foam. So watercolor is too wet with the water. It's not going to absorb very well in the foam, but acrylic paint works really well on the foam sheets. So we're going to use both types of paint today. And then that means we're going to need some paint brushes. So I've got a few different styles here, but you can really use any type of paintbrush. And you technically need one paintbrush, and you could just have a little jar of water and some paper towels or napkins to dry off your paintbrush in between different colors. And other than that, we are also going to be using some scissors and glue dots. And using the foam sheets, I think that glue dots work best to stick things down. Sometimes liquid glue doesn't really stick very well, similar to watercolors. It doesn't really absorb very quickly. If you're crafting with an adult, you can also use a hot glue gun, but glue dots are perfect and easy cleanup. So I think that that's everything that you're going to need. So I'm going to flip my camera around so you guys can see my hands, and we're going to get started. Okay, so our first step we're going to do is start with our background. And as we just ran through all of our supplies, if you have any questions at home, if you need a suggestion for maybe a replacement supply, or if you want to tell us what you are using at home, maybe you're using different materials than we are, or you want to fill me and Nicoria in on what colors you're making your mushrooms, please let us know in the Q&A. Okay, so first up, we're going to do a little watercolor first, and we're going to start with our background so that it can dry. Watercolors take a little bit longer to dry and get all that moisture to be absorbed in your paper. So we're going to start with our little Creatology color palette here. You can use any watercolors you might already have at home, but this little set has a lot of really great color options. And you, again, can use any color, any size paintbrush that you want. I'm actually going to start with a larger paintbrush here. So I have this bigger brush tip, and this is going to let you really spread the color, go back and forth across your paper quickly. But you can do it in a smaller paintbrush too. It just might take you a little bit longer. Okay, so I'm going to start with, oh yeah.
We have a question. Can we use glitter?
Absolutely. Glitter is always welcome, in my opinion. You could totally do some cute glitter, whether you wanted to do little glitter dots on your mushrooms, or if you wanted to cover the entire mushroom with glitter, that would be really cute. Okay, so I'm getting my paintbrush wet here, and let me get this water in here so you can see that as well. And so I'm really saturating my paintbrush. As you can see, I'm dipping this into my water, and then it's really like dripping off of the paintbrush. And I'm going to take all of that and put it right into my little blue paint pod. And I'm going to take a little bit of that water, and I'm going to mix in with some of the dark blue. And I'm mixing directly into the little paint pods. And that's fine. It's not going to go all the way down into your the paint that's not wet below. So you can kind of mix directly on it. So once I kind of have my paintbrush now pretty saturated with blue paint, you can see I'm just going to go right onto my paper and start going back and forth, just to kind of make a little abstract, smeary blue sky. And I'm not going all the way to the edges. You can if you want to, but I kind of like that it's just a little bit of, like I said, more abstract. And it's not completely covered. And if you get some areas that have a little more paint in it than others, add a little bit of water. So I'm just dipping my paintbrush directly into my water again. And without getting more paint, I can kind of move the paint that's already on my paper. So until watercolors dry completely, and actually even after they dry, if you get them wet again, you can kind of manipulate them and smear them around. So if you want certain areas to be darker, you can just pick up a little bit more paint with your paintbrush and bring it back over onto your paper. Oh, my paintbrush shed a little bit, get that out of there. And the fun thing about watercolors is, as you can see, as I add more water onto my paper, it'll start to pool and spread. And so you can kind of push the color around and you can create different patterns. If you just want it to be really straight brush strokes, you can just go back and forth. If you want to add a little bit of texture and smush it around a little bit, just add a little bit more water wherever you want to do that. And you'll be able to move all of that paint pigment all over your paper. And I'm just going to go down a little bit more than halfway here. Okay, so now you can see all of this area here is really saturated. It's got lots of little pools of wet paint still. The edges are starting to dry already really quickly. But now I'm going to paint a little bit of brown at the bottom to be my forest floor. You could also do green if you want to, or you can mix your own colors, of course. So I just went ahead and rinsed my brush out. And since we're using watercolors, you don't have to dry your paintbrush. You can just directly put it right back into your next color. So you can see I dropped quite a bit of water all from my paintbrush here. And then I'm just going to smush my brush tip around and around, trying to make sure I'm getting lots of paint wet and it will stick to my brush then. And then same thing, I'm just going to kind of brush back and forth. And if you go right up to the edge of your blue, if it's wet, they might blend a little bit, which I kind of like, but just so you know that they might start to blur the lines between the brown and the blue. Add a little bit. Have a little bit of this like darker gray green, pop a little bit of that in there. So you can layer different colors as well. All right, so we've got our background all painted. And again, with watercolors, that's the fun part, is that there's no precise way to do something like this. We're just kind of creating a colorful background for our mushrooms to go on top of. So when all of this like pooling starts to dry, it will leave little like watermarks, but almost cloud-like. Same with down here, it will just give it a nice little texture as it all dries. And you can do as much or as little as you want, like I said. And if you don't have watercolors and you're using acrylic paint to do the same thing, you can do the same thing. Yours will look a little different just since it's different style paints, but it'll probably dry in about the same amount of time as well.
Hey,
Okay.
Tiff, I have another
Yeah.
question. Why are there Sharpie lines on the paint?
Oh, my paint, they're actually little cracks. So sometimes as the paint dries, it will crack a little bit. So you can kind of see through they're just little cracked lines in my watercolor palette. But as they get wet, it just connects again. So it doesn't hurt it if yours has cracks in it too, that's fine. But yeah, just little cracks in it. I think that's what you're talking about. If that's not, put it back in the Q&A, let us know.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's gonna be everything we're doing for the background of our little watercolor scene here. So I'm just gonna set this aside, trying not to pour or spill any of my wet paint on here. I'm gonna set that aside to let that dry. And that's same with the rest of the watercolors. It's all we're using the watercolors for, and this is this first step. Okay. So next we're going to start making some actual mushrooms, which is I think the part we're all most excited about. And we are going to draw our own mushrooms. And you can mix and match any colors and sizes. Some of these are the little mushroom cap on this one is about 3 inches tall with a similar size little white base here. And then some are really tiny, only like a 1/2 inch tall. And it's fun to kind of have different sizes, and you can create a whole little composition similar to this. And you can mix and match different sizes and overlap them to make them look like they're further or closer together. And so we're just going to draw our own mushrooms. And in real life, as well as imaginary life, mushrooms come in a lot of different styles. So you can kind of get away with making any style mushroom, and they probably will look realistic. But to start, I'm going to start with a similar mushroom to this big polka dot red one. And I'm going to start with drawing kind of a straight line at the bottom first. And I'm just using a marker here. You can use a pencil. I'm just using like a brown Creatology marker from my little kit, but you can use any marker you want. We're going to cut all the lines off, so you won't ever see the lines. Okay, so I'm kind of drawing like a straight line here at the bottom to start. And again, this is about 3 inches or so. And then I'm going to curve along the edge from 1/2 of my line. And then curve up, sort of like a little bell shape. And then we're going to do the same thing coming back down. And then as we cut this out, I might round my corners a little bit at the bottom here. But sometimes starting with a straight line makes it a little bit easier to know where you're going to want your shape to finish at. And you can also freehand cut your mushrooms. You don't have to draw them if you don't want to. But we're gonna draw a couple more on this red paper first here. And draw a little smaller version, so a little cap top. And then as you come down, just kind of go out a little bit, curving, and then again, creating that little straight line at the bottom. And then maybe we'll do a long skinny one. So I'm gonna start with our straight line here. With a little curved edge. And then instead of getting curved right away, we're going to go straight up and then curve down. Okay, so those are a couple different options on our red. I'm going to do a couple in some different colors as well. And so we're just going to draw all sorts of mushrooms, then we'll cut them out. I always like to do sort of a assembly line when I'm crafting and making any project, that you can kind of draw everything first, then we'll cut everything out all at the same time. So that way you're using all the same tool over and over again. So if you want to do even like a big round mushroom, and just draw like a half circle. And I always am a little bit sketchy, so as I draw, it's like little short brush strokes with my marker. And again, we're gonna kind of cut right along the inside of our lines when we cut these out. So you can, if you mess it up, we can also turn it over. This could be the front side. Any of your markers could be on the other side and you'll never even notice or see that. And just like little half circles, look like a little mushroom cap. You can do taller ones again. And these, of course, on their own, don't really look like a mushroom yet, but once we draw and cut out their bases as well and add all the cute little decorative details to them, they will start to look like a mushroom. And since you can mix and match any sizes that you want to, I think it's kind of fun to just draw a bunch of them. And then as we cut them all out and start to layer them into our mushroom scene, then you might have a couple extras, or your forest might be a little bit denser than mine and have a lot of mushrooms in there. It'll all be really cute. Do a couple in yellow. Same with here, this line, as I was just saying, I wanted to kind of curve that more. All of that little edge, we'll just flip this over. So this will be the back of our mushroom and you won't even see it. Brighter yellow as well. And so let's see here. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 mushroom tops. And that's more than I used in our original little example here. So we're going to draw some little mushroom bases next. If you want to keep drawing more mushrooms, you definitely can. We're going to switch. I'm going to pull in some white foam sheet next here. And I have some with some yellow or green. You can mix and match, again, different colors. I think the little white stem is put with certain types of mushrooms looks maybe the most realistic of a mushroom, but they also come in a ton of different styles, and it's fun to use your imagination. So you can use all sorts of colors. Okay, so to do our little mushroom base, we're going to, looking at some of our examples here for this larger one, for instance, we're going to start with like a skinnier little neck, and it's going to kind of curve out into a flat base. And then you can do some a little bit wider. You can also do like a little triangle style. I'm going to do more of a straight line all the way down instead of curving it. And add a little curve at the bottom instead. And we are going to be using acrylic paint as well to paint our foam. So if you are using, I like to just do like some little detail work with the acrylic, but you could paint the entire acrylic mushroom or you can paint the entire mushroom with acrylic paint as well. So if you decide you want to change one of your colors, you definitely could. And you could paint it into using a different material also.
Hi, Tessa, we have another question. Are you drawing on paper?
I'm drawing on foam sheet. So you can see a little bit here that it's quite a bit thicker and it's kind of spongy. So you can like squeeze it. And so these foam sheets come in packs of all these different colors. And they come in like a multicolor pack. So you get all these different colors together from Creatology at Michael's. And so see, yeah, it's a little bit thicker than a sheet of paper compared to like this backing is just a piece of construction paper and it's much thinner than the foam sheet. And the foam sheet, it's like really bendy. You can bend it and it doesn't really crease the same way paper does, which is nice. And it's really easy to cut. It's like, again, it's kind of spongy. You can press it with your fingers and it kind of has a little bit of a give that feels almost like a sponge. So it's kind of fun to cut through even. If you don't have foam sheets, you definitely could use paper if you wanted to, and you could use acrylic or watercolor to decorate that still. All right, we're just gonna draw a couple more little mushroom bases, and maybe I'll do a couple in different colors too. So if you want to mix and match different colors, do a pink one. And as you can see, all these different little shapes, we're going to mix and match them all once we're done. So if you drew lots of little mushrooms, make sure you draw some smaller little trunks for them. If you have really big mushroom tops, we want to have some bigger ones, but some of them you can mix and match. Like this little yellow mushroom in our sample here has a much bigger top and a fairly small little trunk. So you, again, don't have to have them be exactly the same size. All right, and then maybe I'll draw lastly, just a couple in yellow. All right, so again, we've got all these funky little shapes now ready to be cut out. And so we're gonna grab your scissors, and that's the great thing again about foam sheets. If you're using foam with me today, really any scissors will be able to cut through it. And I always like to kind of cut whatever I'm cutting out away from the rest of my sheet or my paper. And so that way you have a little more control over this piece that you're cutting out, and you're not dealing with your scissors getting caught in all that extra paper or foam. And so now I'm just going to put my foam further into my scissors. So when you're using your scissors, the more control you have over your scissors are going to be further into the mouth of the blade. So that's going to be closest to your handle. If you cut with the tips of your scissors, it tends to not have as much force because all the force is coming from your hand when you snap it closed. And so the further away, the more likely you are to bend the paper or the foam and not cut all the way through. So take your foam and we're going to open our scissors as wide as you can. And I'm going to put my foam into the mouth of my scissors and then cut through. And sometimes I like to not ever totally close my scissor. So as I'm cutting through, before I actually I get to the end, I'm going to open it up and keep cutting. And I like to do that just to get a cleaner edge. Sometimes as you're cutting, if you close your scissors all the way down, it can leave a little bit of like a tear mark where your scissor tips meet. Okay, so I'm starting with cutting out some of our bases or our little mushroom trunks. Kind of looks like a little perfume bottle or a little genie bottle. And we're just gonna set these aside. So we're gonna cut all of these different shapes out. And again, I'm cutting just a little bit, kind of like inside the edge of my line that I drew. So it kind of cuts away that line, but we can also just turn these over as we glue them down. And as you're cutting these out, depending on how long you want your trunk to be, if you want it to be a really tall mushroom or a really short one, you can leave a little bit taller at the top of it, but we're going to add our mushroom caps on top of all of these so they can overlap it as well. And if you at home are struggling with your scissors at all or your material to cut this many out, you can also continue to add more. So maybe you only will finish a couple mushrooms right now while we're all crafting together. And then you can continue to cut out more if you want to a little bit later, or you can make more later to give to people too. I always think these little mushroom, this kind of little scene would be a really cute little card to give to a friend.
Hey Tessa, does your foam stick without glue like peel foam?
These sheets do not. So these are just the same foam on both sides. Some of Creatology foam little objects, there's like little stars or flower shapes, and some of those little shapes have just like the adhesive on the back that you peel, but these do not. We're going to use glue dots to glue ours on today. If you are using foam sheets that have the peel off on the back, that will totally work as well. It'll be really easy for you to stick them down, and you'll be able to just cut through them with the peel. So you don't want to peel it yet. You leave your backing on there and cut your shapes out. And then right before we're ready to stick them on, you'll just take that little backing off. But for my foam today, I'm using these little glue dots here. Again, as I'm cutting away from all this extra. And then I have this whole extra piece of foam that I will save for more crafts.
We have a comment from Kiana. The owls are so cute.
Oh, I'm so glad that you like them. All right, and I can see a couple of our little mushroom tops here as well are gonna start coming out now. And start to play with these. Now we have a little base and a little top, we can stick these together and you can start to see how these are going to be able to be puzzled together, and we can make little pairs with them and make our own little mushrooms. I'm gonna do like two little piles here. So I'm gonna keep all of my little mushroom bases together and then all my mushroom caps together. And since I didn't draw them to necessarily go with one or the other, I think I'm just going to mix them together as we glue them and create little pairs with all these different parts. If you made a lot of little mushrooms, like these little tiny ones, sometimes the tiny pieces are the hardest ones to cut out. But just take your time as you're going through the tiny little edges of them. Right, we are getting to the end of our stack here of mushrooms that we drew. So we're going to cut out some of these big ones now. And so for something like this, where we kind of drew a flat line and then it's going to, I want this little edge to curve though. It's going to kind of start, instead of going directly up and straight, I'm going to go from a little bit of an angle here at the bottom and then curve my scissors into my line. And then that just gives you like a little bit of a softer edge as it comes down onto that straight line. And this, I'm just going to cut that little edge a little bit more. So again, some of this you can see my little line and my outline there. Kind of edited the cut as I went and got a little bit messy. So I just gonna flip that over and you'll never see it. If you've already finished cutting out all your mushrooms, maybe you only want to make a couple of them, or you're a really fast cutter, you can definitely start attaching them together with glue dots, or you can start painting them. We are going to paint them first, I think is easiest, and then we'll attach them as we adhere them to the background. Okay, there are all of my mushroom parts. So now we've got a whole bunch of little mushroom bases and a bunch of mushroom caps. And we are going to be able to mix and match all of these together. So I do like to pair them together now and paint them, but we won't really glue them together yet. But that way you know which bases are going to go with which, and you can kind of paint them to match if you want to. So I'm going to pick a couple different ones here and see. This is a little bit of a bigger cap, then I might want a little bit of a bigger base. So these I'm probably going to put together. Same with some of my bigger ones here. See, we're just kind of mixing them depending on which ones you want to live together. Maybe I'll do a full pink one with a matching little cap and base. I'm just setting them on top of each other for now, so we can get an idea of which ones are going to work together. Switch that one to a little white base and a little pink one on my little yellow one. So now you can see I've got all these little mushrooms that are all kind of paired up together, and you can mix them all around if you want. As you can see, I can switch this one and this one, and that is just as cute. You can do all sorts of different mixing and matching. There's no real wrong way to do it. It's totally up to you. And then we're going to decorate some of these fun little details. So I'm going to use acrylic paint to decorate mine, but you can use acrylic paint at home as well. You can also do markers. I know someone mentioned wanting to do glitter, and I think that that is great. So you can definitely do all different types of details to decorate them. One thing I didn't mention at the beginning is that I actually used a pom-pom to make this sort of larger sponged polka dot on this big mushroom. And so I have this whole big bag of Creatology pom-poms, and I'm just going to pick a little pom-pom here that I would actually dip this into paint and then use this as like a little sponge to create little dots. You could do the same thing with a cotton ball or Q-tips even. The other thing we're going to do to create little dots is the end of our paintbrushes. So I'm going to take a paintbrush, and not the brush end, but the little rounded end of the handle. We're going to dip that directly into paint and then use that to make perfect little dots. All right, so let's get decorating. So again, I'm using my little acrylic paint options here. You can use other options as well. And so to start, I'm going to take some of my white paint. And I'm going to start with making some polka dots on a couple of these little mushroom caps. So to do that, I'm going to, like I was just mentioning, I have just like a standard size brush here, but I'm going to use the handle end that's kind of rounded on top here. I'm going to dip that little end directly into my little paint pot here. See, I just got a little bit of paint on the end. I'm going to take one of my mushroom caps, and then I'm just going to kind of gently put a little dot directly on. And you might be able to do like 2 dots, and then I would dip my paint handle back, my brush handle back in. So you can see as you're doing this, it makes nice little dots that are almost perfectly round. And you can vary your sizing if you want to. If you don't press all the way down, you'll make a smaller little dot than if you press your handle all the way down. I've got all little cute dots on my little pink mushroom cap. And I'm just going to take a napkin or a paper towel. I'm just going to wipe off the handle of my paintbrush. And we can do another one. So again, different size paintbrushes might have different size handles. So the smaller your paintbrush, the smaller the handle will probably be. So you could do smaller dots or bigger dots, depending on the size of your paintbrush handle. And so you can kind of grab different sizes and play with that as well. I'm going to do some green polka dots on one. And then it's the same thing. I'm just going to take my little paintbrush handle and I'm going to dip it directly into my little paint pot. And then deciding which one to do. Maybe we want to do green on green. All right, another little mushroom cap all decorated. All right, we're going to do one more here. I'm going to do more little white paint. Again, I just wiped off my paintbrush handle with a napkin. All right, and then we're going to use our pom-pom as well to make a little like sponge paint on this larger mushroom. And so I'm just going to push a couple of these little ones out of the way to let them dry. Keep their little bases with them so we know which ones we want to match together. Right, so then with our little pom-pom here, I'm going to, you can dip it into your pot or sometimes your little lid might actually have enough paint, or you can squeeze some of yours out onto a paper plate or a napkin. I'm just going to dip my pom-pom directly into my paint. And then I'm kind of holding on to the end of the pom-pom with one side, with my hand on one side here, paint on the other. And then I'm just going to press directly down to create a little sponge print using a pom-pom. And dip it back in. You can probably get away with a couple of prints before you have to get more paint. Look how cute that creates some fun little texture from the pom-pom. And you can use bigger or smaller pom-poms. This one is about a medium size pom-pom, but you could use larger if you want to do bigger little prints, or you could do a much smaller one if you want to do tiny dots. But you could, it would leave a very similar look still, no matter what size you do. All right, then to create some other little detailing on these, we are going to use our actual paintbrush as well, not just the handles. And we can add some little detailing along the bottoms of them. And I'm going to use a little bit of this brown paint. And this one here is just the light brown. You could use any shade that you might want though. I'm going to take like the base of some of these. And I think what gives a really nice texture with something like the foam is if you don't use too much paint. You can always add more, but adding too much at the beginning makes it a lot harder. So I'm going to take my paintbrush and an extra little napkin here. I'm going to take my paintbrush and dip it into my paint, but then on a napkin, I'm just going to kind of wipe away a little bit first. We can always come back and pick up a little bit more off that napkin, but then you can see my paintbrush has much less paint on it. And then we can take our paintbrush and go onto the foam. And I'm just doing like kind of makes a much drier paint rather than big globs of paint, and just creates a fun little texture on there. And we can go back to our paintbrush or our napkin here and kind of rub our paintbrush against that extra paint that we just took off to kind of refill our paintbrush and then come back on. This just kind of gives a little bit of a natural or aged look to our mushrooms. You can do it along the side like I am here, or the last one I went from the bottom. And those details will be really quick to dry because our brush is really dry itself. So instead of adding big globs of paint, this creates a little bit of a different look that you can kind of see through. It's not totally opaque. It's not covering the foam. It just is kind of a nice little layer on top. You can do the same thing with the mushrooms itself. Still got a little paint on this napkin. All right, maybe do one more of these little ones. And you could do a similar thing with glitter here. If you want to just add a little bit along the edges, you could do that with a glitter pin or just a light sprinkling of glitter. If you have markers, you could also do cute little designs. Maybe instead of brush stroke design, you want to do more of a shapes. You could do little triangles or stars or hearts. Okay, so now that we've got some little detailing happening to a lot of our little mushrooms here, I'm going to pack up these paints. We can see if our watercolor is about dry. I think it should be. If yours isn't dry yet, If the bottom's dry, you could still add your mushrooms to it. Let's see here. Yeah, like mine, you can see here, it's just a little glistening in the top here. Still have a tiny bit of water drying just at the top, but all my mushrooms are going to be glued to the bottom portion. So that's fine. If you've got a little bit still in your sky, like I put a little more water there than on the base, you could definitely add them on. If not, you can just follow along the steps right now, and then you can glue yours down once your watercolor backing is dry. Okay, so I'm going to move a couple of my little mushrooms out of the way here, so we can start to glue these all together. Again, some of these that we did like the dry brush, they're already dry, but some of your polka dots might not be dry yet. So we'll just be careful with those as we glue them down. Just gonna move all these so we have a nice little surface to work on. Okay, so now I've got my watercolor here, and this is where we're going to jump into using our glue dots. So glue dots come in all sorts of options and sizes. So I've got some little mini ones here, but I think I'm going to use my larger ones for most of this. And I have the style that are on a little roll, but yours might be on a sheet as well. But either way, if you haven't used glue dots before, there is a little shiny circle. You can just barely see it on this little tape. And we're going to stick that directly to the back of the foam. So for instance, I'm going to start with our largest one. So my largest one is this big red one with polka dots on it. I'm going to start with my base though. So I'm going to put a couple of glue dots on the back of my foam base. And the reason we want to start with the base is that we want the little mushroom cap to overlap the base so that it looks like it's sitting on it and the base is growing out from underneath it. Okay, so I have a couple different little ones there. And then you can kind of pick and choose where you want your mushrooms to go. I know I'm going to want to layer in some smaller ones. So going to start there. And then if your polka dots are still wet on some of your caps, like mine are, you can add some of the glue dots directly to the paper instead. And that way we don't have to worry about messing up our dots. We'll still be able to stick it down and just be careful. So I'm putting a couple of glue dots onto the foam, the top of my foam base. And then I'm going to do a couple more above it too. Oh. Glue dot didn't want to stick. Sometimes you can even kind of peel the glue dot off. Okay, so now I'm going to be careful with my cap here, but I can press it down onto. I'm just going to kind of press down in between my dots that I'm waiting to dry. And there you have your first little mushroom attached to your forest. And then we're just going to continue to build out our forest from there. So if you have only a couple mushrooms, you might already be almost done with your artwork, which I hope it's gorgeous. I'm sure it is. But maybe you have a lot like I do, and you're going to want to add quite a few. And this is what's fun about a craft like this too, is that you can keep adding. So if you decide tomorrow that, you really liked making mushrooms and you want to make a few more, well, then you can just keep adding to this piece of artwork and let your little forest keep growing, or you can make more. But even in our original sample here, you can see I left a little bit of negative space in between to create a little composition, but you can fill that in as much as you want. You can layer more and more and more. And I stuck to just a mushroom forest, but maybe you also are making some little animals out of foam, or you made some trees for your forest. You can add as many different types of plants as you want. Okay, so again, I'm sticking some glue dots directly to my paper rather than the back of my mushroom because my polka dots are still wet. And so I'm going to carefully slide my little mushroom cap to the edge of my counter so I can pick it up easier. And then just be careful, hold it from the edges. And then I can just stick it right on top. And then you can either use your finger or even use the end of a paintbrush to kind of press it down in between any of your polka dots. You just want to make sure you press it toward anywhere you put a glue dot.
Hey Tessa, we have a good suggestion. Can we add in bugs?
Absolutely, that would be really fun. Yeah, I mean, bugs live among the mushrooms, so that's a good idea. All right, so I'm gonna also start adding with some overlapping pieces too. So I'm gonna start with this guy. You can kind of grab your cap as well to kind of see where that might land. I think that's kind of fun, overlapping the whole thing. So I'm going to add some more glue dots onto the foam. You don't need a ton. The glue dots work really well with the foam, which is nice. So probably at least 2, maybe 3 per little foam piece. So again, I'm just going to lay this down and then using a paintbrush tip, I'm just kind of pressing in between all my polka dots so that I don't smear them. You can see these ones are overlapping a lot. Some you don't have to overlap at all if you don't want to. And if you decide as you are crafting here that maybe you do want to add a few more details than what we've done so far, you can always continue to decorate your mushrooms after they're glued down as well. So if you're at this point and you've decided, you know what, I do want glitter, or I do want to add some sequins or paint bugs on top, then you can continue to do that even after they're glued down. And this one, I let this little mushroom kind of expand out of the paper, but I think that's kind of fun that it's like growing out of your artwork. So you don't have to stay in the lines if you don't want to. And we are almost finished with our artwork. You can see as I started here, I started with my largest ones first. If you start with little ones, you might end up covering them completely. I like the way these are overlapping and that creates some fun, like communication between all these different pieces. But if you had a little one here, you might miss it completely. So I think starting with your large ones and then working around by adding all of your smaller ones as you go. Same thing, I have another little one here that these polka dots are almost dry, but I'm just gonna kind of hold it from the edges and then just lay it right on top of the glue dot. And then grab like the end of a pencil, like an eraser, or the end of your paintbrush here, and you kind of press in between your wet paint.
Hey Tessa, can we do shading?
Yeah, absolutely. That's even some of this we're doing with the paint. You could add additional shading if you wanted to add a little bit of paint or marker. You could use a pencil as well to create little shadows. And that would be a nice little additional touch as well. If you wanted to continue to do paint options for that, you could add some shading along the bottoms of your mushrooms, and you could do that even after they're glued down. I would use a similar way we did it where we kind of do a dry brush technique so you don't get too much paint and create a harsh line. Just get your paintbrush, just a little bit of paint. You can brush it off on a napkin a little bit and then just slowly add in nice little lines. Add another one here. You can see I'm kind of just picking in as I go where I want these mushrooms to live. You can kind of place one, move it around, see how that feels. And I think that's all the mushrooms I want. I have one extra mushroom, but I think that that's going to feel too crowded. I like that this little composition that we've created here, these ones are overlapping. We still see some of our watercolor background. And there you have your own little mushroom forest. I hope that you all had just as much fun as I did. I loved making mushrooms with all of you, and I'm excited to be back again next week. We'll be crafting some more fun fall crafts, and thanks so much for crafting with me and Michaels. Bye.